Wow, what a nice crowd tonight. Thank you all for coming out. My name's Eric Blue. I'm your host. So welcome to the multifamily meetup at the Real Estate Roundtable. What are you doing? Alrighty. Thank you for coming out tonight. So I just wanted to say our guest speaker tonight's going to be Jim Lofgren from the California Apartment Association. Update us on the growing threat of rent control in California. But before that, we've got lots of other content. So the agenda for tonight, networking, you guys figured out between 6 and 6:30. It's a little after 6:30 now we're starting. Just want to let you know we're going to try to take a break around 7:15. We might miss that mark because we have a lot of content during the first half this time. And then the main speaker, Jim, will come on, and then he should wrap up around 9 o'clock. But then we have networking till 10 o'clock after that. So who was here last month for Neil Bawa? What did you guys think? Was that not awesome or what? I thought so too. I actually have a slide about it later. He's going to be coming back in July to do market trends. So he really likes our groups, really impressed with what we're doing here. So much so, I've now got hired on with the Grow Capitus and Multifamily University to be in charge of their growth team to roll out more meetups like this around the country. We're going to be doing a test pilot in their Peninsula chapter starting next month, so you'll be getting information about that and let your Bay Area friends know. So it's a great organization, and he's one of the most knowledgeable people in the multifamily world. I just love this data-driven approach and how he evaluates deal, and I'm thrilled to be working with them. Okay, I just want to give a shout out to the Fulton 80 Tap House. They're our main sponsor for this event. We've been at this location now for about 7 months, and it's just a fantastic venue. I don't know if Dwight's in the back there, so thank you, Dwight. Let's. That's what I like to hear. Big round of applause for the Fulton 80 Trap House. So if you get a chance, check in on their Facebook page. Show them that you were here. I'm having problems with my slides. Okay, welcome. Okay, who's here for the first time? You should have gotten a first-time sticker. Let's hear it for all the first-timers. I applaud anybody. You know, we all love the business of real estate and the financial freedom and wealth building it provides, and we love it when new people show up and want to change their life well, so I applaud all you new people. Also, for all my regulars, if you see someone wearing one of those first-timer badges, make sure you say hello and make them feel welcome. So here's your multifamily team. You'll hear from Keegan and Kyle. And myself, of course. And I just want to give a shout out for our newest team member, Nicole. She's handling check-in from Ryan, Nicole. So we love having her on board. We could use some more help. So if you want to get involved, please talk to me. We'd love some more help. What's great is, Ryan got to meet every single person coming in tonight. So it's a great opportunity to connect with people, getting involved and participate. And and I can't forget about Colton. Colton's running tech for us. He's recording all this. So it's just a little update. We normally Facebook live feed this, but we're having trouble with the internet. But we record everything, and we even do a picture-in-picture. So the slides are embedded with the speaker. So you get to see the slides they're talking about in real time as they're talking. So this will go out on our YouTube page, and you'll get notification when that happens. Also, we provide all the slides from tonight as well. So when you checked in, we got your email address. So tomorrow or the next day, you'll get all the slides, not only mine, but the presenter slides as well. So you don't feel that you need to take copious notes because you'll get all this content. Also, we share the email list with all the members. So if you connected with someone and didn't get their contact information, you'll get the contact list of everybody that was here tonight. For some reason, if you don't want to be on that list, just let me know and we'll remove you. Okay, disclaimer. So everything that's presented here tonight is for educational purposes only. If you talk to anybody here about a specific deal or specific returns, make sure you speak with your own advisors, legal team, and do your due diligence. We just create a platform for you all to get together. We don't vet anybody, so it's your responsibility to check with everybody. Okay, so who here also comes to the Real Estate Roundtable? That's our sister group here. That's focused more on single family, wholesale, flips, buy and hold, other real estate related strategies. I know a lot of you are. I see a lot of the familiar faces. But the newest part is we've teamed up with the Multifamily University. That's Neil's organization. We paired with them because our philosophy is very much the same. We believe that the education is what drives this business. If you want to have good partners, whether you're doing syndications like Neil or you're doing flips, if your partners aren't educated on what you're doing, they're not going to make good partners. And then also we want to create an environment so you can connect with people you know, like, and trust. In fact, last time, I'm thrilled, we've got Will here from Sierra Bay. They are killing it with the connections they're made here. So really take advantage of the networking opportunities here. So as part of the Multifamily University, they have an awesome online training platform that's 100% free. It's full of webinars and all sorts of content about real estate investing. So please take advantage of that opportunity as well. Also, we have Bring a Friend cards. So make sure you grab some of those and hand out to your family and friends if you think this information would be valuable to them. We'd love to see more folks here. So those are available as well. And with that being said, on with the show. So I'm going to bring up Keegan now. So the State of the Union's now become a regular part of the program. And Keegan, grab a regular mic. Keegan will present that. Let's hear it for Keegan.
Test. All right. State of the Union. Do I have a clicker? Sweet. Thank you. All right. State of the Union. Let's see what's going on in America. See your favorite president, Donald Trump. All right. So Trump's favorite form of communication is his tweets. So we're going to talk about the things that he's talking about now and how they're affecting the markets. Build your products in the U.S. and there are no tariffs. So this is the big talk of the town right now, right? The trade war. How's that affecting the market? It's causing a lot of volatility right now. There's kind of just some uncertainty. How's things going to play out? At the beginning of the month, it looked like we were coming to a deal. Some of the specifics of that deal, we were going to impose 10% tariff on about $200 billion of goods. And then there was kind of some retrading at the last minute. China was trying to put some stuff back on the table. So Trump dropped the hammer and said it's going to be 25% from now on. And that kind of started negotiations over, right? So market reacted a little bit. It was dropped about 1.5 points in response to that. But right now, everyone's kind of just seeing how things are going to shake out. So he's either a genius or this is going to end in disaster, right? So jury's still out. So I guess we're rooting for him, right? The other thing he talks about a lot, with all the fake and made-up news out there, Iran can have no idea what is actually going on. He tweeted that out a few days ago. So this is something he's talking about a lot now. And then he followed up with this. He wanted to clarify, I guess, the position. If Iran wants to fight, that will be the official end of Iran. Never threaten the U.S. again. So he's putting some pretty harsh words out there for a potential adversary of the U.S., right? So again, this goes back to that uncertainty, that volatility. How's this going to play out? Is this going to escalate even further? Are we going to go to war? What's going to happen here? So he's just kind of stirring the pot, I guess, right now. But again, just has a potential effect on the stock market. So it's something to be aware of as investors. Working. Oh, there we go. All right, April jobs report. So this is some very encouraging data. So unemployment came out sitting at about 3.6%. We were estimating it was going to come in at about 3.8%. So we good? Very encouraging. We beat the expectations. So April jobs report was very positive. New job growth, about 263,000 jobs. I believe they're estimating somewhere around 190,000. So they crushed it. So I don't know where all those new jobs are coming from. Maybe maybe China's sending over their workers because they're losing jobs. I don't know. But we're starting to make stuff in America again. I don't know. But yeah, very encouraging. It's good for us as investors because now we have a stable employment levels in the U.S., which keeps renters paying their rent. So good to be apprised of. All right, wage growth. So average hourly wage beat expectations. It's up around 3.4%. So kind of this rare occurrence where there's this inverse going where the lower half of wage earners are vastly outpacing the upper half of wage earners. So those hourly wage earners are actually starting to see a lot of positive economic forces coming their way. So that's good for us because that's the rental base, right? So if you're a landlord in the U.S. right now, it's a good time to be a landlord because people are more likely to be able to pay their bills. If you're a California investor, it's up at about 5.2. I think that's more of an overall average between upper half, lower half for California, but still positive trends. Some multifamily specific data. So this is vacancy by class. You can see the gray line up at the top there. That's going to be your Class A. So that's going to be the highest vacancy rate. And some of that's going to be skewed because as new units come on, they're naturally going to be vacant. So, but you can see very clearly your Class B and C units are going to be very steady, and they're going to be a significantly higher occupancy rate. So that's why Class B and C right now, it's kind of the belle of the ball if you're an investor, whereas all your new units coming on are going to be Class A. So this is, I wanted to show, this is the new units coming online. So 2018 had about 245,000 new units come online. Of those, about 226,000 were Class A. Class B units that came online, only about 8,000. So demand is really high for Class B and C, but we're not adding to the supply. So if you can get a hold of those units and own those units, that you're going to see some probably positive growth in that market as we continue into the future. So bottom line, being a real estate investor is pretty awesome right now. So you're in the right room. So that's all I got.
Alrighty. So last time we started this section called critical concepts, and we wanted to start with the basics. So we started with cap rate, and I think everybody thought that was way too basic. At least that's what the feedback I got. So we thought we'd get together and come up with some more advanced content. So why I love real estate investing, particularly multifamily, mostly because it's one of the best tax-advantaged asset classes you can invest in. You often hear me say when it comes to taxes, it's not how much money you make, it's how much you get to keep. So if you're not doing your real estate investing tax advantage, you're not playing the game right. So depreciation is really the name of the game with real estate investing. That's where most of your tax benefit comes from. So disclaimer, I'm not a tax professional. I don't even play one on TV. So for your review, I've included all the links on here. So if you want to go dive deep on any of the information, the links will be provided in the slides. So these are active links. So when you get the slides, you can click on the links and go directly to the pages that this information came from. So what is depreciation? So basically, depreciation is an accounting method to recapture the cost of equipment put into service over a certain time period. So for tax purposes, it allows you to recapture the cost of it over its useful life by deducting the amount off your taxes. So why that's important, generally what happens with real estate investment values over time, they don't depreciate. In fact, they tend to go up in value for the most part. So that's why this is so huge in real estate investing. So this is often, when you're talking in the multifamily worlds, they often call this a phantom expense. It's an expense that you get to take right off your tax return that it isn't actual cash. So that's why it's so huge in real estate investing. So basically, the three factors that determine amount of depreciation you can take are the depreciation method, the recovery period, and the basis of your property. So for multifamily, the depreciation method is determined basically you get you take the value of the property over 27 and a half years. The modified accelerated cost recovery system, for multifamily, it's straight line depreciation. So basically, you'll take 1/27th of the cost for the current year. And if you guys have any questions as I go, please let me know. So to determine your basis in the property, there's basically 4 steps you go through. So when determining the basis of the property, you start with the cost. So the cost is the acquisition cost of the property, and it includes some of the transaction costs, closing costs, and whatnot can also be included in your tax basis. What's nice about this is actually the cost whether you finance the property or not. So that's another huge benefit. Then this is the key part. Once you determine the cost of the property, you can only depreciate the buildings. You can't depreciate the land value. So the way to determine the land value is the most common way is to use the information provided by the tax assessor. When you look at your tax bill, they have it broken out, the land value versus the building value. And assessed value doesn't necessarily mean market value. So you use those percentages to determine your building to land ratio based on your current market value. Once you have the basis in the property, here's the calculation for determining the basis in the property. Basically what I just said, you take the proportion of land to building and then times it by current market value or your cost basis, which is what you purchased it for. And then you determine your adjust basis. Your cost basis and your property can go up and down depending on if you do improvements. So if you do improvements, they're added to your cost basis, which raises your cost basis. So that means your taxable basis actually will go down. And obviously in reverse, if you take the depreciation off the property, your cost basis goes down. So the amount of annual depreciation you can take is the adjusted basis divided by 27 and a half years equals your annual depreciation. So that's the cost amount you get to take right off your taxable income in the year earned. Any questions so far? But what the IRS giveth, the IRS taketh away. So the downside of depreciation is depreciation recapture. If you sell the property, the amount of dollar amount that you took in depreciation, you then have to pay a recapture tax rate, which is 25%, plus a 3.8% tax on investment income, otherwise known as the Obamacare tax. The best strategy around this is the 1031 exchange. When you 1031 exchange, your cost basis just transfers to the new property, so that just keeps rolling forward. So in theory, you can tax defer your property until death, and then your heirs can inherit the property tax-free. It is subject to an inheritance tax, but you wouldn't have to pay any of the capital gains tax. And right now, the inheritance exemption is $11 million, so you can defer a lot of property that way. But wait, there's more. That was supposed to be funny. Thank you. Finally, I got a shout out over here. I realize this is tax information. It's kind of boring. But the tax advantage and the tax leverage aspects of real estate is really why it works. So cost segregation is really come into vogue lately. It's a great way to get accelerated depreciation in your property. And basically those additional write-offs you get from that can really increase the cash flow on a property. So what is cost segregation? Cost segregation is where you break out various aspects of a property that you can depreciate over a shorter lifespan. So it's things like your carpet and your fixtures and the things that are not part of the physical structure can be accelerated at a faster rate. And if you look at, in fact, they're included in here are the IRS publications. They're in one of the source notes. But if you go look in there, it has the depreciation schedules for different asset classes, and they typically range from 5 to 15 years, depending on what type of asset it is. Now, the one thing you got to be careful about with cost segregations, they don't actually create extra deductions. You're just taking part of that 27 and a half years, and you're accelerating a portion of that cost basis recovery faster. So you're basically front loading your depreciation so you can get better cash flow in the early years. So how cost segregation works, you have to hire a qualified engineers that do these studies, and they classify the various aspects of the property that you can depreciate. Basically, there's no standard format for how a cost segregation has to be done, but it has to conform to certain rules. And one of the rules is you have to create a rationale for why you're doing it. But that kind of comes with these the companies that perform these cost segregation studies. And then once they do the study, they establish the basis for each one of those items and what the depreciation schedules are. The disadvantage of cost segregation is they work much better for, well, when you're doing a renovation or an improvement on a building or it's a new building, you have much better cost data. So if you actually, say, put a piece of equipment or renovate a unit, you actually have the real data of what that cost was, which is a much better way of creating a cost segregation because you can use the actual cost for renovating something. They also require, as I mentioned, that you have to have a formal engineer-based study. They're fairly expensive. Typically, they're in excess of $25,000, so they really work better on bigger projects. And then, of course, depreciation recapture. So any money that you accelerate through cost segregation is still subject to recapture. So if you're claiming more deduction up front, you're still subject to that higher fee when you sell. Once again, I'm not an advocate of selling tax-deferred exchange your property. But wait, there's more. That's better. So you guys may have heard of the Trump tax plan, otherwise known as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of December 2017. So as part of that, they created bonus depreciation, and that's where you can really turbocharge your cost segregation. So as part of that, as part of the bonus depreciation, you can take 100% of new and used. This is the first time they've had used equipment purchases to be subject to bonus depreciation in the tax code. So any new equipment or remodeling put into service since December 2017 through December 31st, 2022, you can take 100% of first-year depreciation of that asset up to $1 million. So that is huge. If depreciating, all the expense you're putting in a property the first year, that substantially increases your tax write-off. Also, they expanded Section 179. The limits used to be $500,000. They're now $1 million. And the difference is Section 179 allows you to expense capital equipment as opposed to depreciating. So that's huge. If anybody's operated multifamily, the big challenge is, let's say you buy an HVAC system, you used to have to then, depreciate that over the depreciation schedule. Now you can take 100% of that cost up to $1 million of equipment put into place in that year. So if you start compounding all these different tax advantages, I've heard of deals where they've taken up to 30% of the total depreciation of the cost basis in the first year. So, if you're looking at ways to accelerate your wealth building, taking money that you otherwise would pay in taxes to reinvest in, say, 2 years, that's huge. That's money that used to be tied up for 27 and a half or 15 if you do a standard cost segregation. So I know most real estate investors don't get excited about the tax aspects, but really the tax aspects are really what make this such an awesome asset class. So what about syndications? So the great thing is if the syndication is set up properly, they're mostly LLCs, but LLC is what's called a check-the-box tax entity. So typically they're structured as partnerships or limited partnerships, which are pass-through entities. So any of the tax benefit at the property level would then pass through to all the members of the LLC. So even if you're participating in syndications, you can take advantage of these. So if you're vetting a syndication, that's one thing I would talk to about the sponsor. Make sure they're doing cost segregation. I mean, if you're investing in a large, 150 unit multifamily, this should be standard practice from the sponsor's point of view. I'm having problems with my clicker. Oh, and there you have it. That was how to accelerate wealth with tax. Okay, how about some feedback? You guys were awfully quiet during that section, so. It was good? Okay, yeah, there we go. I got a woo. All right, so another part of our regular team here is Kyle. Kyle's going to give us, where's Kyle? There you are. Get over here. This one? Yeah.
Hey guys, how are you guys doing tonight? Great. So my segment here is if I can do it, then you can do it. And I guess the whole reason that this is a segment is basically a 20-year-old is doing multifamily, so it's supposed to be encouragement for you guys. And my mission in this segment is basically if I can encourage one person tonight to take action, then I've done my part. So I hope that this is beneficial for you guys. And just to talk a little bit about myself, if you didn't hear my introduction last week, I have actually, I'll show you some of the current deals I'm working on right now. So I have a deal in Louisville, Kentucky that's 107 units and a 12 unit in Atlanta, Georgia that I'm working on as well. So these are both about to close and are pretty much fully funded. So I'm currently doing it, and I guess the thing here is, there's nothing stopping you guys. And I'm going to share with you kind of my secret sauce for success so far and the formula that I think that everyone should use. So I say that, number one, you have to have a definite purpose. You have to know what you're doing, and you have to know why you want to do it, right? That's step number one. Okay. Well, yeah, whatever. Commitment is also important. So not only when you find that definite purpose, you have to commit to it, and you can't stray from it no matter what excuse that you have. I've actually left school and a full soccer scholarship to UC Davis in order to pursue my financial freedom. So there has to be some sort of commitment. And on top of that commitment, you have to have massive action. So massive action, I'm actually moving to Tennessee tomorrow morning, and I will actually be following the market per se. So yeah. Oh, I think I'm pressing that. Okay, so that's on me. I was blaming Eric over here. No, it's my fault. I got it in my hand. Yeah, okay. So yeah, massive action's important, right? You have to be able to, say, this is my life, I'm taking it by the reins, and I'm going to make things happen. So I'm actually, following the market, which, I encourage everyone to do if you have the ability to. And the last thing is time. So you have to do this. You can't just do this for a day. You can't just do this for a week. You have to continually put this into action over time, and then you will see results or success in this equation. So enough of this rah-rah stuff. I want to tell you guys, actually, why am I moving? What are the benefits? Why is Tennessee a good market? Why is this area of the country important? So number one, proximity to existing deals. So as you can see, the blue dots are the Kentucky deal and the Georgia deal, and that blue dot in Tennessee is where I will be. It's Chattanooga. So then you also have population statistics, cap rate, price per door, so affordability, and then the historical appreciation data. So we'll move on to that. Affordability, yeah, it's cheap, but you get dirt cheap rents, right? That's what everyone says. Everyone tells me, okay, yeah, you're paying less, but you're not going to yield as much. The rents are so low, you're not going to get much out of it. So I've decided to kind of show you guys price per door. You have $45K price per door on average and an average rent of $975. So that's about 2% of that. And in California, you're going to get, about $120 per door, $1,300 rent. So yeah, you're getting more in rent. But the thing is, pro rata, in proportion to the amount that you're paying for it, are you actually going to be yielding? Because investment's about yield. If you were to go in and put $1 million into an investment and get $200,000 out of it, and then your neighbor goes and puts $100,000 into something and makes another $100,000, you might say, oh, I beat him. I made $200,000. He made $100,000. I'm the winner, right? Well, no, your yield's different. Your yield's actually lower. You have a 20% yield. He has a 100% yield. So he won, even though he made less money. He made more money on his money that he put in. So that's kind of investing for you, and that's kind of my counter argument to cheap rents in that area of the country. So that's kind of how the math. And then also population statistics. So people are actually moving out of California, they're moving out of New York, and you'll see the red states are outbound states, so they have more people leaving them than going into them. And then you'll have the blue ones where more people are coming in than leaving. You'll notice Tennessee is definitely a blue state, and you have things like Texas. So people are moving here. Why are they moving here? Well, it's cheaper to live, for one, and for two, you have a much friendlier tax atmosphere, and people are tired of losing basically a lot of their paycheck to the tax man. They would like to keep more of it. So they're trying to move to more affordable markets. And then appreciation. So you're actually going to see quite a bit of growth in this market too. You'll see in 2000, Went from 83,000 median to 173. So that's 107% increase. And again, people will say, well, yeah, anything can go from 83 to 160, right? Like that's not that much. Like it's peas and it's pennies and on the cents. But the thing is, again, it's the percent increase there. It's about the proportion. So who wants to come with me? And now no one has the excuse that you don't have a boots on the ground partner and you don't know anyone in those markets. You know me, here's my contact information. If anyone wants a boots on the ground partner out there or wants to discuss the market, please reach out to me. Thanks, guys.
Alrighty. Okay. Now, another regular recurring part of what we want to have here at the multifamily night is deal show and tell. The one thing I really like about both the Real Estate Roundtable and this group is we really want to focus on real people doing real deals. So we're always looking for content for this section. So if you got any interesting deals or want to present them, just let me know and we'll start scheduling out for future meetups. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and take a 15-minute break. Make sure you get a chance to freshen up your drink, support the Fulton 80 Tap House. And then we'll get Jim mic'd up for the threat of rent control in California. So see you in 15 minutes. All righty. So I'm going to welcome Jim Lundgren.
Jim Lofgren.
Lofgren from the California Apartment Association. I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to you, and you can go ahead and start with your introduction, and we'll get rolling.
Very good. Well, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before a friendly crowd. Not all of my crowds are friendly, and I've actually had a great opportunity to meet several of you, a lot of new faces here tonight, and I'm one of them. This is my first time here, but I see a lot of people that I've known for quite some time, so I'm really pleased to be here. My name is Jim Lofgren. I'm the Senior Vice President, one of several. I think often what happens, they give you a title in lieu of pay. But I am a Senior Vice President with the California Apartment Association. And the California Apartment Association is a new employer of mine. For 20 years, I was the Executive Director of the Rental Housing Association here locally. How many people were members of or heard of the Rental Housing Association? Yeah, for many years, we were involved at the local level. And we merged with the California Apartment Association. We were always a local independent chapter, but we saw that rent control was coming to the Sacramento market, and we felt that it would be much better to be more closely associated with a strong statewide organization with deep pockets, big PAC funds, something that we're going to need in dealing with the growing threat of rent control, which is my topic tonight. And actually, I say the growing threat. The threat. It's really actually here. A little bit about the California Apartment Association. While our name has the word apartment in it, we're actually an organization that serves both the single-family and multifamily investor, owner, property manager, vendors. Been around before the 1950s. We offer a variety of services from rental forms to tenant screening to attorneys on staff to answer questions, and of course we do government affairs. And I am responsible for the northeastern portion of the state, 21 counties, Solano County to the Nevada border, Sacramento County, all the way up to the Oregon border. And I lobby primarily at the local level, but this year, because of everything happening at the state capitol, I've gotten more involved at the state level. And one of the things that we are doing is having to get really into the grassroots, and so we're beginning to develop a move towards a grassroots campaign to sort of counter what's happening on the other side. And I'll get into that as we go along. But if you're interested in looking into the membership, you can always go to our website at caanet.org and find out more about us. There's my contact information. I did pass out a flyer to everybody. If you didn't get one, it talks about rent control, but it also has my contact information on it. If you did not get one, there's a flyer at the exit, and then also up here at the front. So here we go. So the purpose of my presentation here, I want to explain rent control and the other laws associated with you. Now, how many of you have owned property that is under any form of rent control right now? Okay, a couple of you. I don't want to get into the basics of it, but it's really important to understand that with rent control, there's other things associated with it that people just aren't aware of. I will give you an update on what's happening around the state and what's happening here locally, and briefly talk about how you can help defeat these measures. First of all, I just kind of want to talk a little bit of how did we get here, okay? Our biggest problem right now is that the supply of housing hasn't been keeping pace with the growing population. We've had obviously rising rents for many years. Every day that the newspaper would publish that Sacramento was the hottest market in the nation, those of you who own rental property going, yay! Those of me who is fighting rent controls going, oh my God, I have to deal with another complaint about the rising rents. But we've had stagnant wages. If you look at graphs that show like the rents increasing over time, really, it's part of the problem is wages have not increased and kept up with it. If the wages have kept up with it, we wouldn't have the same problem we have. And of course, renters are struggling to pay the rent and avoid eviction. I have two daughters. They're both renters, and they struggle at times because of the stagnant wages, especially coming out of the Great Recession. And you were seeing an increase in the homeless population. And that is when I talk with elected officials, especially at the local level, they tell you that about 75% of the complaints that they're getting from their constituents are related to homelessness. So it is a problem, and it's something that our association industry has been trying to deal with. The California Apartment Association has been primarily a property management association. We've gotten into the development side because if we don't build housing, that's which is the solution, we are never going to get rid of this rent control problem. And unfortunately, there's a lack of funding and other barriers to building affordable housing. The redevelopment funds were cut. We're a primary source of affordable housing financing. And what people really don't realize is that homelessness really wasn't a problem until the 1980s. And back in the 70s at the federal level, there were the beginning of the cuts to federal funding for affordable housing, and then also some cuts in assistance for the mentally ill. And that, it's about 50 years ago. And so it was a steady growing problem, and now it's got to be a crisis level. We're not going to solve this thing overnight. It's going to take many years to get out of this quagmire that we're in, and we have to have the guts to make the right decisions. As a result of all of this, we have tenant advocates calling for rent control and just cause eviction. They're taking full advantage of social media, getting a lot of attention and organizing, and they're unfortunately having a lot of success. I think this thing is just spooked. Okay, here we go. What did it do? Jump about 50 slides? Let me go back to where I was, and then we'll take it one slide at a time. There we go. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, I'll just make sure I push the button hard. Got it? Okay, this is just a quick overview of rent controlling to go into a little more details. Okay, with rent control, you may not be aware of this, but this is like rent control, the most modern version of it. What we're seeing are ballot measures around the state at the local level, or we see city councils adopting rent control. And they're doing what are called rent rollback requirements, where there's a date by which the rent must be rolled back. I'm going to talk a little bit about rent increases under rent control. I'm going to talk about just cause eviction, talk about rent boards, new fees that are placed on rental properties, and the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. How many people have heard of the Costa-Hawkins rental housing. I'm going to get into a little detail about that. Okay, base rents and rollbacks. When rent control is enacted, there's two ways in which the base rent is set. Okay, it fixes a base rent based on a certain date, and in the city of Sacramento, there's a specific date at which rent will be rolled back to if that measure passes, and it requires the rents to be rolled back to this lower amount, and then the rents can only be increased from the base rent according to the law itself, the percentages maybe by which the rent can be increased. And there's fees that are charged separately from the rent that are often prohibited or limited, because what happens is a lot of times there's this goal of I'm going to raise, there's a limit on rent. Well, I'm going to increase some of the other fees associated, with the rental. Well, under rent control, every single fee that you could possibly come up with, new utility charges or different things, they will include that as part of the rent and put a cap on it. So rent control limits the amount and the frequency of rent increases. They're usually limited to one per year, and the options are either some sort of a fixed percentage cap, like 3%, or there may be some sort of an inflation-based cap, like the CPI. Any rent increases other than the annual adjustment must be pre-approved. Landlord can request a higher increase if they're needing to get a fair rate of return on their property. Let's say you do some sort of major capital improvement. But those of you that maybe attempted this in a rent-controlled city, you've got to go through a lot of hoops in order to accomplish that, and it's a very frustrating process. And what we've heard, there's no single test for determining the so-called fair rent of return. Most commonly, they use this maintenance of net operating income. I'm not going to go into that, but there are ways to do it if you wanted to, but it's an exercise. Rent decreases under rent control. Now, tenants can request a rent decrease. Okay, so if your property is not maintained, there is a reduction in service. Let's say you had a pool and the pool's no longer operational. Then the tenant can request for a rent reduction under these situations. So everything is in the tenant's favor. Just cause eviction. So how many people have heard of the term just cause eviction? Okay. And this is what's really important for people to understand, because some people hear, rent control may not apply to me. I just have single family homes for rent, but just cause will, so you need to understand this. So what just cause does is it prohibits the no cause termination of tenancies, okay? So now you can only terminate a tenancy with a cause. You've got to state it, and they can only be terminated for some very specific reasons. And these reasons are maybe tenant's faults or may not be, maybe owner initiated. So here's some examples. On the tenant side, you can evict a tenant for non-payment of rent, a substantial breach of the lease, nuisance, failure to allow access, and maybe a few others. So you can see that's the tenant's fault. So you still are able to evict a tenant. There just may be some hoops you have to jump through. On the no-fault side, there may be some things that you'd like to do as the owner. You might want to, you bought a property, you may want to move in, or move a family member in there, or you want to maybe remove it from the rental market, just sell and get out of the business. Well, these are the different ways in which these are stated reasons you can evict a tenant, but you can no longer just give them a 30-day notice or a 60-day notice without a cause. There are some additional restrictions, and that is sometimes there's just a requirement of pre-termination warning notices. So if for example, like for the city of Sacramento, before you can give a 3-day notice, say a renter hasn't paid the rent, you're going to give them a 3-day notice, you actually have to give them a warning notice before you give them a 3-day notice. Okay, so if you've got a property, think of the extra time and expense that is if you've got a property manager handling your property or doing it yourself. But part of the reason for doing that is to kind of mess up the eviction process, because a lot of people won't be aware of this. and they'll mess it up. But plus also it just gives the tenant a little bit more time. No fault evictions generally require relocation payments and a first right of refusal if the unit is returned to the rental market. Okay, so if you're going to, if you bought a property and you want to move in yourself and you got tenants in there, you're going to be paying relocation fees to the tenants to move out. And I will get into some of the costs associated with it, but we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. And there's a lot of notices that need to be filed with the city. So there's a lot of paperwork on your end, paperwork on the city side, and of course, that means there's going to have to be some sort of a fee. There's a governing body, usually it's a rent board, 5 to 9 members, somewhere in between. And they're either elected or appointed, depending on the law, but they try to limit it so that property owners are prohibited from holding a majority of seats. So it's meant to be more of a renter's board. And somebody's got to pay for all of this, and that person is you. And the fees range from $25 to $270 in Berkeley. I think it's $250 a unit in Berkeley. And you can't always pass on those fees to the renter, so it's a cost that you're going to have to absorb. So that was sort of an overview of rent control and just cause. Now I just want to talk about the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. And by giving you this foundation, it will make sense as I explain some of the laws and other issues coming down the pike. So Senator Senator Jim Costa and Assemblymember Alan Hawkins were the authors of the Rental Housing Act. And that was enacted after rent control was first established in the state, and they found out there were some flaws in it, because as rent control was imposed on all the properties, all of a sudden those cities did not, development just stopped. There was no investment into those properties, into those cities. So this act was enacted in 1995, and it prohibits local governments from imposing rent control on single-family rentals and condominiums. So right now there is an exemption, even if there is rent control passed in your city, unless they change the state law, single-family rentals and condominiums are exempt, okay? That's why it's really important when you hear about an attack on Costa-Hawkins and you're an investor in these type of properties, pay attention, because the goal is to make every property fall under rent control. The Costa-Hawkins Act also prohibits local governments from imposing rents on new construction built after 1995. And this was the clause that was created because apartment developers, for example, just stopped building because there was no incentive. So you will see new construction in rent control cities because they're exempt. But what we're seeing now is an effort to remove these exemptions. And the goal again would be every property would be under rent control in California. At least that's what some of the tenant advocates would like. That's not really. They haven't had success in the legislature. So what they've been looking at, and you'll hear this when I talk about some bills, they've been looking at, well, maybe some sort of a rolling 10 or 15 or 20 year period of time that there's an exemption so that we don't discourage new construction, but after 10, 15, or 20 years, it would automatically fall under rent control. Still, that's very chilling for investors who go, why come to California when I could go somewhere else and I don't have these? The last thing is a provision known as vacancy decontrol. This is critical. This is what saves owners in San Francisco or other rent control cities. This allows property owners to set the rent after a tenant moves out. So you may have a rent control property, it's way under market, you've had a tenant in there for 10 years, finally they move out, you can reset the rent up, okay? And that's basically, if you talk to owners in San Francisco, this is what saves them. Otherwise they'd be sitting on the rent control property forever. In fact, you got a lot of people who've been tenants for 25 years and the differentiation in rent is just astronomical. But there's this big movement to get rid of this provision and require that in between tenancies, that there not be this vacancy decontrol, that rent control be applied even when there's a turnover in the tenancy. So you're going to hear about a tax on Costa-Hawkins, and in fact, Proposition 10 in the November election last year was all about repealing the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. So let's just talk about the threats of rent control at the national, state, and local. I'm just going to touch on the national just real quick, and just by focusing on Oregon. How many people heard that Oregon was the first state to pass statewide rent control? It was signed into law back in February, and this is a mistake. It says 5%. It's actually 7%. Okay, so it's sort of the new standard, CPI plus 7%. And I say for now, because there's already been a new bill introduced to reduce it from 7 down to maybe it's 5, I'm not sure. But so the key is people, and I often hear that when I'm talking to people here in California, they go, well, you know, if we had something like CPI plus 7, we could live with that. Okay, think Trojan horse, think, you know, camel's nose under the tent. It's because it's easy sell. Hey, yeah, CPI plus, yeah, they call it anti-rent gouging, okay? It's just the first step towards rent control, okay? So I guarantee, well, I can easily say I can guarantee you now because I know new law was introduced, but they're not going to have CPI plus 7. They're going to have something else shortly. And in California, what's been proposed right now is CPI plus 5% in a bill I'm going to talk about. So this is Oregon, but I have automatic Google searches, and anytime the word rent control appears in an article anywhere in the country, I get an alert. Okay, I get more messages from my, Google account than I do from my kids and my wife, and they're talking rent control all across the country. I fully anticipate you'll be hearing the presidential candidates talking about it. And so this is not just unique to California, not just unique to Oregon. This is nationwide, and we're dealing with this crisis across the country. But the fact that Oregon passed this first statewide rent control law, that inspired everybody in California to go, oh, let's do that in California and do it one better. So we've got the national threat that's actually come here. So rent control can be imposed in California in 2 different ways. At the state level, it's either through legislation or through a ballot initiative. And we were able to defeat legislation because we had a much more business-friendly legislature in the years past. And we're a nonpartisan organization. We generally get more support from Republicans, but this is really more of a Democratic state. And so there's moderate Democrats, and then there's the growing, progressive left-wing social democratic wing of the Democratic Party. In fact, the Democratic Party now has put in their party platform rent control as part of their platform. And so you're either going to see, so there was attempts to make changes in the legislature. That didn't work. So we had last November an effort to repeal the Costa-Hawkins Act. It cost our industry millions and millions of dollars to defeat it, and we soundly defeated it. It was like, a margin of, 40%, 20% or so. It was a huge amount, and we defeated it. But that doesn't matter. That was November, because November was the same time there was a big shift in the California election outcome. The Democrats in both the Senate and the Assembly now have a supermajority, which means they can override any veto. Often the governor would veto laws that we were opposed to, and they wouldn't have to worry about it being overridden. But right now here in the Senate, it's just so heavily swayed towards the Democrats that we're just seeing a lot of new laws being introduced. And the problem is we were able to peel off a lot of, a significant number of moderate Democrats. And even though the Democrats are in the majority, we could get many of the moderates to side with us, the business-friendly ones. Well, a lot of the moderates lost, and you'll see the fight is now not between Republicans and Democrats, it's between the moderates and the left wing of the Democratic Party. And so you'll see the moderates now shifting a little bit over to the left for survival. So that's the Senate. Here's the Assembly, 60-20. Okay. So, I mean, everything's stacked against us. It's much harder for us to win in the legislature. That's why we're having to get our members and non-members to get more involved in talking with their elected officials. And of course, at the statewide level, the Democrats swept every statewide office, as they've been doing recently. And Gavin Newsom, who's from San Francisco, he supports rent control. He has said, give me a rent control bill that's reasonable, whatever that means, and I'm going to sign it. So that was like, whoa, this is going to be great. So something will happen. We don't know what, but that's pretty ominous, okay? Do we take time out for a drink now, or do you want to pass around some shots? But this is really disturbing. Okay. Their top priority, and I mean, it's good to see that there's this interest in solving the housing crisis. The governor says it's a top priority, and there have been supply side solutions proposed, and of course, we recently passed in the same election last year some bond measures to $4 billion towards housing, so that's good, but we're still falling short. The estimates vary from different sources, but we're about 100,000 housing units short each year. And and thank God we've come out of the Great Recession. We're creating all these jobs, but we're just not building any homes. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the top 5 new bills that are introduced that have some legs on them, meaning they have gotten out of the first committee and maybe a second committee, and they're headed to the floor. I'm not going to do the schoolhouse rock, how does a bill become a law? Okay, but I will just say this, their bills are introduced in either the Assembly or the Senate. They got to go through that House by the end of May, so we're waiting to see next week which bills actually get through. Then they go to the other side and go through that. If there's no amendments and they pass, they go right to the governor. If there's some amendments, they got to go back to the other House. So we still have time to kill some of these bills. And a lot of times one house will let it pass through to put the work on the other side, the Senate side, to fix it or kill it. But we're a little bit concerned. So let me just tell you a little bit about these bills. First of all, there's the AB 1482. Okay, this is the one that's the most chilling one. And it says 3% on there. This one is at 5% right now. This is David Chu, Assembly Member Chu out of San Francisco. They don't call it rent control, they call it the rent gouging, and it's right now CPI plus 5%. That's where we've got it at. There was an effort to do it at 3%. I haven't updated the slide here. So this has passed out of the Assembly Housing and Community Development Committee. We recently did a big call to action. We had all of our members calling, and we were over at the state capitol. We outnumbered the renters 2-1. But not surprisingly, the Assembly Housing Committee is kind of stacked against us. It passed out with a 6-1 vote. It did pass out of the Assembly Appropriations Committee by 12-4 vote. And now it's waiting vote on the Assembly floor to get out by the end of next week. And I would say it's got a shot. Okay, so that would impose statewide rent control on all rental housing. They got to change the Costa-Hawkins Act, so it would not apply to single family and duplexes, but it would be statewide rent control, just like you have in Oregon, at CPI plus 5%. Now that could there could be some deals made in the process here. So so just remember it's CPI plus something, okay? But it's statewide rent control. So if I live in Folsom. There's no way the city council in Folsom would pass rent control, but the state will impose it upon us if that passes. So then we talk about just cause eviction. So there's a couple just cause eviction bills that would just impose just cause eviction statewide. One of them, the AB 1697, would impose it after a tenant's been with you for 10 months. The other one would just take effect immediately. So what they've been doing is sort of separating the bills. So you've got a rent cap on one side there, AB 1482. Then you've got the just cause eviction. So remember, that's basically the goal of just cause eviction is permanent tenancy. Okay, you will have that tenant forever. okay? And so, and that could be a great thing if it's a great tenant, okay? But if it isn't, okay, and your next door neighbor's complaining there's illegal activity going on there, but they won't go to court and support you on that, you're stuck with them. So then there's some other ones, AB 1110, and that is extended notices for rent increases. A little bit milder here. This bill would require 90 days notice if a landlord with a month-to-month tenancy increased the rent by more than 10%. So if you're going to give a 10% increase, you'd have to give a 90-day notice. And if you're going to go more than 15%, you have to give 120 days notice. It's pretty sad when you look at that going, oh, that's easy, that's not as bad, okay? Okay, these are major changes in the way we do business, but that's to give you an idea of what's coming down the pike. Okay, so tenant rent strike. So really one of the efforts is to create, the tenant advocates would like to, in apartment communities, establish unions, tenant unions. That's the goal. And so there's been a lot of legislation dealing with setting up some form of tenants unions. In this case here, this is Senate Bill 529. Initially, when the bill was introduced, it would allow tenants to organize a tenants union and to collectively vote to withhold rent payments if the owner increased the rent more than the CPI. So if you raise your rent, 4%, the tenants union would vote and say, we refuse to pay the rent, and the state law would back their ability to do that, okay? And then you also would have to give you'd have to give just cause to that. And so that we're working on some amendments, but this has passed out of the Senate Judiciary Committee. This has passed out of the Senate Appropriations Committee. It's waiting for a vote on the Senate floor. Now, these are just 5 of the worst bills, but I have 3 pages of other bills. Now, we have defeated some. We did beat back Assembly Bill 1481. That was a just cause, statewide just cause, one of the just cause eviction bills. Wait, I take that back. It was AB 36 we defeated, and that was to extend the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act to single-family homes. And so that we were able to defeat that. So that was a win for us. And we're hoping we can knock off a couple of these. But that's just to give you an idea. Now, here's the thing. How many people knew about these laws before tonight? Okay? This is what's happening. Okay? Because you know what you're doing? You're getting up in the morning, you're going to work, you're making your living, you're doing your job, and you're doing all that, and you're thinking your elected representatives are watching out for you. They're watching out for somebody. The only thing they're watching but you is your wallet, okay? So what I got to tell you is, I'm up here and I do this every day, and I got to tell you, this is really sick. But I think about rent control every day, okay? And it's like a presidential campaign or whatever. I wake up, I have to monitor stuff and whatever, social media and all that. It's depressing. Because that's what I used to love my job. I don't want to say I don't love my job. My job was a lot more fun when I was teaching people how to do property management, working with local government on how to amend laws and stuff. It just has changed since the organizers from the Bay Area were successful in imposing rent control there, and they came to the state capital, Sacramento, and their goal was, we want rent control in the state capital of one of the largest nations in the world. They really want it here in California, in Sacramento. So I did talk about Proposition 10, the repeal of Costa-Hawkins. It costs our industry tens of millions of dollars, but it was rejected by 60% of the voters. But unfortunately, we just learned, and they did this right before the Easter holiday, on Good Friday, a filed Proposition Part 2, basically our son of Prop 10. So we have a new statewide ballot measure similar to Prop 10 that's being circulated, that's being filed with the Secretary of State and ready to be circulated with the intent that it would be on the November 2020 ballot. So even though we soundly defeated Proposition 10, they're coming back in with a modification. What they're doing is Prop 10, their initial one, they overreached and they included single-family homes. So they've made a modification to remove single-family homes or at least a small investor and a couple of other tweaks to it. So that's going to be a real threat, and it's going to cost a lot of money to defeat that. So locally, how do you pass rent control at the local level? You have a local ordinance passed by a city council, board of supervisors, or you can do an initiative. Locally in the city of Sacramento, the tenant activists were unable to get the city council to move on it, and so they went the initiative route. And so there is in the city of Sacramento, rent control and just cause initiative. It's already qualified for the ballot, and this is the most bizarre thing about this. And there's a handout for you which has details of this. They, in February of 2018, that's when the tenant groups came out and started circulating petitions to get this on the goal was to get it on the November 2018 ballot. They couldn't do it. For whatever reason, and there's a lot of theories, they were unable to get enough signatures in time to get it on the November 2018 ballot, but they got enough signatures to qualify it for one of the next elections. And that's up to the city council to set the election date, and they have to decide it's either going to be March or November of 2020. Now, we used to do all of our elections in June, but because California wants to be relevant in the presidential primary, so we moved the presidential primary to March, so all the local governments will shift to March. So this will either be in March or November of 2020. The city council has not made a decision which ballot it's going to be on because they want to drive me nuts, okay? Because it makes a difference for me whether it's March, which is really, 10 months from now, or November, which is a lot longer. So, and we don't expect them to make a decision for a couple more months. We can't wait on our end. So we've already launched our campaign. The other side actually wants to have it done in March for a reason I don't know why. Probably better for them if they did it in November because it's the presidential election. But I think what they're worried about is the longer it drags out, the more difficult it will be for them to sustain a campaign. So we suspect it will be in March of 2020, but there's reasons to do it. It gets political. So we're not sure, but we're already launched our campaign. Both of us, both the opponents and proponents have launched their campaign. You may not know it, you may not feel it. I assure you, we're doing work. A lot of what's done in a campaign, and I won't go into the detail, a lot of what you do in a campaign happens in the back, okay? You do research, you do polling, you do a lot of things to shape your message. So we're doing a lot of work in the background. And I assure you, when Prop 10 was on the ballot, everybody said, you're going to lose. We soundly defeated it because if you put forth the right strategy, you can do that. So we're very careful about what we're doing. So if you don't hear anything, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means we're doing a lot of behind-the-scenes work. We've already organized joint forces, the California Apartment Association, Sacramento Association of Realtors, and of course their statewide organization and national organization. There's a business group called Region Business. We'll be working with the chamber. One of the things that I'm doing is organizing the business community. And we're all going to get together to defeat it. We have a campaign, it's called Citizens for Affordable Housing. We think the solution is to build more affordable housing. If you go to that website, you can make a contribution to the campaign. We're probably going to be asking in the neighborhoods of $100 per unit for the campaign, maybe even more. Who's behind all of this? Okay, so it's a group under the banner of Housing for Sacramento, but all of this is funded by the Service Employees International Union. They'll spend, I don't know, between $500,000 and $1 million on the campaign. It's union money. You can't really negotiate with them because they're doing it for other reasons, but there's other groups that are involved. ACE, I don't know if anybody's familiar with a group that used to be called ACORN. They're now called ACE, the Alliance of Californians for Community Engagement. There's a union-supported group called Organized Sacramento, which has a lot of tech resources available to them. the Democratic Socialists of America, who are really proud of the fact of AOC winning back in New York the first Democratic Socialist elected to the Congress. A traditional tenants group called Tenants Together, and another group called Public Advocates, very active group with a lot of legal background. So this is what we're up against, and you'll see them very active in social media, getting a lot of media attention because they don't have quite as much money, so they have to get a lot of attention through actions. They will do sit-ins. They've sat in on, property management companies. Their now tactics are sitting in on elected officials' offices. Before a vote was taken on one of the bills that was in the assembly, they looked up who were the elected officials, members of the assembly on that committee, and they staged sit-ins on some of the key votes and put a lot of pressure on them. So what's happening is, again, those activities are occurring and many people aren't even aware that that's happening. And so we're slowly losing stuff in California because we're not as politically active. That's just not necessarily part of our DNA. So the city of Sacramento rent control measure, you've got the details of it. I'm not going to go through all of it. So here's a couple highlights. If it passes in the city, now this is, even if something passes at the statewide level, if something is more strict at the local level, it takes precedence. So in the city of Sacramento, the annual rent increases would be limited to the CPI, but within a 2 to 5% range. So if the CPI is 2.5, your rents can only go up 2.5%. If the inflation takes off and goes to 8%, you're capped at 5%. But thank God there's a 2% floor in case, for example, we're in this, deflation period, Rents will roll back to February of 2018. And that's the case if you have the same tenant in the union. And this is where that Costa-Hawkins thing is really important. So this is kind of weird. You could actually have an election and this ballot measure in November of 2020, and you'd have to roll back your rents all the way to February 2018 if you had the same tenant in the unit at a multifamily. Now, if they the reason why first of all, if you're single family and condo and they don't change Costa-Hawkins, you're exempt from all the rent control provisions, but not the just cause. So just remember that. If you invest in single family and condos, or if you duplexes are not exempt. I hear a lot of times people say that. They are not exempt. If your property manager tells you that, tell them, call me, because they're not exempt. I'll refer them to the law. You can look up the Costa-Hawkins law. Okay, so they're not exempt. So if you own single family and you hear the Costa-Hawkins is repealed, all of a sudden get ready, because rent control will likely come your way. But if you only have a limited number, because there is one of the provisions we've seen floating around, is that they really want to go after the corporate single family, the Blackstones that came in and other investors that came in and bought up a lot of single family. So there is a possibility they may compromise and say if you own like fewer than 4, then you would be exempt. Or fewer 4 in one city or something like that, because they think of you as just more of a small investor and they want to peel off that type of opposition. But anyway, getting back to this, if you own duplexes and you have the same tenant and this passes, you'll have to roll back the rent to February 20. Now, if your tenancy changed, because Costa-Hawkins has a vacancy decontrol part, you would only have to roll it back to the beginning of that last tenancy. So if you had a tenant in there for 6 months, you'd only have to roll it back 6 months. You would not have to roll it all the way back to February 20th, 2018. At least that's what our interpretation, big asterisk, because a rent board could say, no, you have to do it all the way back, and then there'd probably be a lawsuit. All of the just cause termination restrictions apply that I talked about, that either tenant generated or owner generated causes only. And the thing about this written warning notice is in effect, the tenant relocation fees, $5,500. For a studio, goes up $500 for each bedroom, goes up another $500 for each disabled, senior, or minor in the household. So you could be paying 2-bedroom, 2 kids, whatever. I mean, you could be paying like, $7,000, $8,000 to relocate the tenant. Okay. Then there's an elected independent rent board. Okay, this is we think is illegal, but there would be a rent board elected by councils, districts in the city, and it's basically a stepping stone to the city council. So some city council members don't like this because they're like, it's going to build in like their next opponent. But this elected board has complete authority over all housing policy. They can set their own budget. They'll set their own fee. They're not accountable to the city council. They're not accountable to the city manager. They're not accountable to the mayor. This is really a big threat, and we think it violates the state law regarding charter cities. So we're looking at that issue. And then again, I wanted to point out that there's going to be an annual fee to fund this program. And in Berkeley, which is about, I don't know, I'm trying to do the calculations on it in comparison to this. But anyway, they pay $250 per unit in Berkeley. So that's just an overview of it. More details are in this sheet. And the sheet also includes a description of Costa-Hawkins. And so you have all that information. So what to do? Now, I'm not going to give all the details about our campaign, okay, because I look around the room and I see several of you that may be pro-rent control. I don't know. I've embedded the crowd here. But here's my message. Get political or leave the state. Either your investments or yourself. And I got to tell you, I never thought in my life that I would think about retiring outside of California. Okay, but I go, if I stay here, how many more years do I have to work? Okay, so we're starting to see the exodus, and my wife's in Boise tonight, and there's a lot of Californians in Boise, Idaho, and they kind of go, it only snows a little bit, but okay. The other thing is, how many people, you don't have to think to yourself, you don't have to raise your hands. But do you really know who your elected officials are? Maybe your city council member you do. Do you know your state? I mean, you have to get them to know you and recognize you. Now, when I go there over the Capitol, I'm in their face all the time now. Okay? But they know I don't vote from their district. Okay? What we need to do is get you to go talk and get to know your elected official. Call them. Go to the district. Do whatever. Make that a mission that they know you. Okay? And don't be a jerk, okay? That's the worst thing you can do. I keep telling people this. I always tell my kids, be a polite jerk, okay? Okay? Never, you lose an argument once you become a jerk, okay? I know that because I've been married for over 30 years, and it's not that I'm smart. I'm smart now, but I was dumb for a long time, okay? But the thing is, just be persistent, polite, and be right, okay? But if you don't get political and you don't start talking to your elected officials, then you deserve rent control because you're going to get it. Now, you have to contribute to the campaigns because it is going to cost money to win. We usually have to outspend them 5 to 10 times, okay? So the campaign, I mean, we spent, I don't want to go through out the figures, but there were tens of millions to win statewide, and we won. And it will be millions of dollars to win. This will be the most expensive campaign in the history of the city of Sacramento. And you need to register and vote. Get your kids to register and vote. Check their political views because the youngsters nowadays are into socialism, okay? So maybe you don't want them to register to vote or hold them hostage with that subsidy you're sending to them. But I have to tell you, I was talking to someone here. No joke. I'm a graduate of University of California, San Diego. I was a history major, studied American diplomatic history, but I took all these poli-sci classes. I had to go back and bone up on socialism because half the time I'm in debates about free market versus socialism. I'm going, am I dreaming? I never thought that would happen, folks, but that's the case here. And partly, we do have problems in the country. I mean, it's just not rent. I mean, healthcare and retirement, there's a lot of issues that we have to solve. it would be much better, I think, if business-oriented people solve them than let other people solve them. So I want you to vote, register, vote, get your kids to vote, tell other people how to vote. A lot of people don't know. Okay, explain this to other people. So if you want to join our association or get more information, you can go to caanet.org. If our campaign, you can contribute to our campaign through citizensforaffordablehousing.org, or give me a check before you leave. But my goal here is really to awaken you, okay? It is not just laws about rent control or your property that are changing. Think about every other law that may be changing, that may be affecting you. I've never seen so many new fees being proposed and stuff that are happening that will have long-term economic impacts. Now, for some reason, because I get invited to speak a lot, people think I'm an expert, okay? And, I'm not being paid. You didn't give me any money, so you're getting your money's worth here. I get people that call me from around the country and say, hey, I'm thinking about investing in California. How's the environment? And I'm actually pro-California. I want you to come here, but I have to explain what's going on. $100 million deal went to Tennessee the other day. But even little small ones, $4 million, and so we're losing those investments, okay? And so the state is slowly eroding, and at some point in time, I'm not going to be the one that turns the lights out. I'm going to bail, but I'm sticking it out. I'm fighting it now, and so stick with me and stick with us and turn this around. It's a great state. It's a great place. I love this place. I don't want it to go downhill, and we just need to work together to solve the problems the right way. So I think that concludes my presentation, and I'm very willing to take a few questions. So, thank you. Now, don't try to stump the speaker here. Be nice. Yes. Yes.
I understand that Nancy Skinner, I think in Berkeley, had proposed some bill, I don't know if it passed or not, where she was wanting to grant tenants.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Go ahead.
Nancy Skinner in Berkeley, I understand that she had proposed a bill that would give tenants a grant, quote unquote, to fight evictions, but most landlords will have to get an attorney. So I don't know, is that on your list, or is?
Yes, it is. And we're working with her. Now, remember one thing, bills get amended all the time because we do have some really good lobbyists working for us. But I believe you're talking about, Senate Bill 18. This bill would appropriate an unspecified sum of money from the general fund to be used to provide statewide competitive grants for rental assistance, but it would also establish a homelessness prevention and legal aid fund and require monies to be put into the fund to provide legal aid to tenants facing eviction. And that bill has passed the Senate, the Senate Housing Committee, passed the Senate Judiciary Committee, but we've heard it's been placed on suspense in the Senate Appropriations Committee because it requires money from the general fund, it's one thing to pass a law that doesn't cost the state money. This does. So there's a pause going on there, but we oppose that if they don't take that money, that funding out. So right now, that bill is hung up in the Senate Appropriations Committee, but you're right. But that's Senate Bill 18, and we are opposed to that unless they amend it. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted a clarification about that anti-gouging bill, the rent control bill that was at the top of the list of legislation you had there. Does it honor the exceptions that are in Costa-Hawkins, or does it cover all rental properties? I mean, for instance, I'm renting out a condo, is exempted under Costa-Hawkins.
Condos are exempt under Costa-Hawkins right now. That bill only imposes statewide rent control, but it does not take away anything under Costa-Hawkins. So if that passes, and unless Costa-Hawkins changes, it'd be a statewide, but it would not apply to those exemptions. But what we have heard is that the author wants that bill to become the mega bill, and all these other provisions be put into it, including some Costa-Hawkins provisions. So we expect to see something in there to remove Costa-Hawkins. I will say that I think that there is growing sympathy for small investors. So I don't want to discourage you from being supportive of what we're doing, but it's sort of part of our problem is we're pretty good at killing things, and then people go, oh, great, I don't have to do anything, okay? We're working hard to get those exemptions, okay? We want to keep Costa-Hawkins intact, and that's our goal, and we think we can do that. But obviously, if we find that we can't, that we will then ratchet down and provide some protections.
One maybe wild and unrealistic suggestion, but if you've got legislators who are going to do something in the face of what the voters just did by a major vote. Voters upheld Costa-Hawkins by a major vote. And if the legislators turn around and try to undo it, I mean, couldn't they be threatened with a recall?
No. You know why? Because the Costa-Hawkins Prop 10 it was really a drastic measure. That thing shouldn't have passed, and it lost big. Okay, so what they're doing is they're going, I oppose that extreme, I want to fine tune it. So that's the difference is it's a softer, gentler repeal of Costa-Hawkins. Does that make sense?
Hi.
Hi, one of my neighbors, former neighbors.
Nice to see you. Two questions. First one is there any visibility into who will be electing that elected board that would be the rent control board? And then the other question is, as we know, as goes California, so goes the rest of the country. For those who are already investing outside of California, what kind of timeline and what kind of discussions are you having? I know your focus is on California, but what's it looking like now in terms of the wave of this happening across the country?
Okay, so to answer your first questions regarding the composition of the rent board and who would be running for those seats, you're going to see the labor unions and the same group, the tenant activists, backing their candidates, and we would need to recruit somebody on our side. And so you're just going to see an intense city council race, really at a smaller scale, but it will be pretty intense. So it'll be the industry really backing, and you could imagine the campaigns that'll be like, I said, oh, that's the greedy landlord candidate. It's going to be kind of ugly. Actually, no, it's not. You want to run for that seat. I don't want to say that. No, we need candidates. Your second question is, what happens if maybe it's not so where so goes where California heads the rest of the nation. Maybe it's Oregon. In fact, Seattle. If you start comparing San Francisco to cities in Oregon or even Seattle, San Francisco's beginning to look a little much more tamer. I do think that we're going to start seeing rent control in other parts of the nation. So I think if you're going to be investing somewhere, you may contact the local apartment association or rental housing association, do Google searches. I mean, do check to see what's happening out there, because you're going to see it in major cities. Okay, so it won't be, or maybe college towns. Okay, you're not going to see it in rural Iowa. Okay, but I would do some. That should be whenever you're doing some investments. I always encourage people to do a political assessment and the impact. Other questions?
Any other questions?
Thank you very much again. Thank you for having me here tonight, and I hope next. Let's see. I was going to say a year from now, but it could be a year and a half from now. I'll tell you, next December I'm going to be celebrating. I think we'll hopefully have a lot of victories behind her. Absolutely. So thank you very much.
All right, if I can get Jack Frost to come up here for a minute. All right, Jack's a member of his group, and he's working on a similar program that he wants to tell you about.
Actually, I was heading to the bar to get a drink after listening to that. So I'm Jack Frost, and I'm the president of a new nonprofit called Pro Small Biz California. Our goal is to help every one of you in this room and your employees start to understand the intersection of business and politics. And this is just an example of what's going on. Rent control is a huge issue, and it hasn't worked any place that it's ever been initiated. And unfortunately, the legislators down at the Capitol, they understand if they can't beat you with an initiative like Prop 10, which was defeated by 60%, well, they'll just go around the people, the will of the people, and you just saw a list of 5 or 6 bills that are in the queue to get around what the people just voted that they didn't want with Prop 10. So if you think rent control is bad, how many of you, raise your hand if you know what split roll means? What do you know about the split roll tax initiative? Raise your hand if you've heard of that. You're talking about Prop 13? Okay, there's 2 people in this whole room that know what the split roll property tax. That's another initiative. It's on the ballot in 2020. The split roll property tax initiative is on the ballot. It's the same as Prop 10, except it's worse. Do you know, how many of you know what Proposition 13 is? Well, everybody here that's involved in real estate should know that Proposition 13 limits increases in property tax on all property. Residential, commercial, multifamily, all property across the board is protected by Prop 13. The split roll property tax initiative that's on the 2020 ballot will carve out the commercial side, and if it's passed, it'll raise every single business in this room will be affected because every commercial property tax will go up. All the retail businesses that are paying rent, their rents are going to go up. It's going to affect the employees. It's going to affect the businesses. These are the reasons why small businesses are leaving California right now at the highest level ever recorded. During a time when California's economy is the strongest in my lifetime. I don't know if there's anybody in here that's older than me, so I think in all of our lifetime, we've got the lowest unemployment rate. Why are businesses leaving California? They're leaving because of rent control possibilities, the split roll. All the things that are driving businesses out of California are happening down there at the Capitol. It's not a good thing. So we've got an event coming up on June 24th. I passed out flyers. If you didn't get one, raise your hand and I'll get one to you. We've got an absolutely all-star panel. We've got Barry Broom, CEO of Sacramento Business Redevelopment. We've got Kelly Brothers, who's going to be the MC. The 2 panel discussions are going to be on the split roll property tax, affordable housing, and rent control are all going to be discussed. We've got Howard Jarvis, National Federation of Independent Business, the largest business association in the country on behalf of small businesses. We've got the California Builders Industry going to be there. And we've got Pacific Legal Foundation, James Berling. And he's written some dynamite articles about rent control. And by the way, he just won a Supreme Court decision. So if you write on the flyer, write code 20, CODE 20, and when you go to Eventbrite to register, it's normally $75. We're going to knock that down to $60 with the code 20 is the promotional code. We're going to feed you some great food. We're going to buy you a drink because you're going to need it. And I think it'll be a really great opportunity. You go to Eventbrite and you put in Rescuing California. If you have any problems with the code or anything, my contact information is at the bottom of the flyer, my email, my cell phone, and the information on how you can register for this event. So thank you very much, and hope to see all of you there on the 24th.
Give me that information and I'll distribute it to our email list. So Jim had one last follow-up thing while I transfer the slides back.
Yeah, I just wanted to do a call out to my bodyguard over here. You know, comes with me to protect me. Actually, this is Herb Cross. He's the chairman of the board of directors for our association in Sacramento Market. He's with Lion Real Estate, which has a property management division, and he's been a great volunteer for many years. How about applaud for Herb? He's been a great volunteer helping us out. Thank you for coming out tonight.
All right, we just have a few more slides here left. So I think the theme of tonight is you got to get involved. You can't just sit on the sidelines and think someone else is going to protect your rights and your investments. So I think more than ever, we got to get involved. We have to attend these events, support these organizations to protect our investments. All right, so for those of you who are familiar with the Real Estate Roundtable, our next regular meeting for the Roundtable will be Monday, June 10th. We will not be having a meeting next week because it's Memorial Day. If you're multifamily people and interested in other real estate, please join us for that as well. Following that will be the next multifamily meetup, which will be Monday, June 17th. I haven't lined up any speakers yet for that, but it will be awesome. And then we're super excited. Neil Bauer is going to be back in July, on July 15th. There's a lot of activity happening in particularly opportunity zones in Sacramento. So he's going to be talking about market trends, and he's really going to try to focus on Sacramento. It's an area that he said 70% of its investor base is from California. So there's a lot of interest, particularly in these opportunity zones in Sacramento. That's all we have for tonight. So please stay in network. We have the room till 10 o'clock. If you feel so inclined, we can use some help packing up. And get involved, vote, tell your friends to vote, support California Apartment Association, and thank you.
All right.